What is up, friends? Johnny Two Cellos here to review the third season of Rick and Morty.
Johnny Two Cellos!
Season 3 of Rick and Morty just wrapped up, and I thought it was a very strong season in a lot of ways. I do feel that over the course of the year, I probably laughed a bit less than seasons past, but I also think that these 10 episodes provided the strongest character development we've seen so far in the series. I'm gonna do a quick rundown and tell you what I liked most about each episode of the season. First, the Rick Shank redemption. This episode brilliantly premiered as a surprise on April Fool's Day in a hilarious reverse April Fool's joke, and the episode did not disappoint either. Following up the cliffhanger finale of season 2, this episode was a tall order, but Rick's escape from prison was fun. This was also the beginning of the Szechuan sauce saga, which ended in McDonald's actually making the sauce again for the first time in 20 years. I loved returning to the original dimension that we saw in the first 6 episodes of the series, which, if you recall, was ultimately Cronenberged by Rick. I also enjoyed seeing the Earth being run by the Galactic Federation, and if I'm honest, I wish they had stuck with it throughout the season. It would have made for a refreshing setting for the show. The episode ends with Beth deciding to divorce Jerry and Rick berating Morty in a scene that references back to the pilot of the series. The biggest and most important plot point of the episode is easily that our Rick ended up murdering the Council of Ricks on the Citadel of Ricks. This comes into play in a big way later on in the season. Overall, very solid season premiere. The second episode was called Rickmancing the Stone and featured a Mad Max type of post-apocalyptic dimension. This episode featured some very solid Summer character development that I enjoyed thoroughly, and the subplot about Morty's massive arm was genuinely hysterical. I loved Summer's mini arc within the episode. It takes Summer getting married and going through a struggling marriage herself to begin to forgive her father for his shortcomings in his own marriage. The final scene of the episode was touching in that Rick and Morty way. Also, the tag with Jerry and the Coyote kills me every time I watch it. Next was the highly anticipated episode Pickle Rick, and honestly, it was an episode I was sort of low-key dreading. I laughed at the trailer that featured the episode, but by the time the episode aired, I was already tired of hearing about Pickle Rick. I know that's just a result of how popular the show has become, but I didn't think it could possibly live up to the hype. Well, I'm glad to say I was wrong. Pickle Rick was definitely one of my favorite episodes of the season. Leave it to Rick and Morty to take an absurdly stupid concept like Pickle Rick and turn it into the most insightful and introspective episode the show has ever seen. It featured ridiculous action as well as great cameos, including one of my favorite comedic actors of all time, Peter Serafinowicz, plus the legendary Susan Sarandon and Danny Trejo. Next was Vindicators 3: The Return of World Ender. This episode seemed to get a lot of hate, but I really liked it. The premise was fun, and I loved the meta humor aimed at Avengers. It was fun to see Morty so bummed that he missed Vindicators 2, and of course we as the audience missed both of the first 2 Vindicators. The twist that a blacked out Rick ultimately became the villain in the episode was a perfect reveal, and it also led to one of my favorite sound bites in the series.
That's a 3-pointer!
The 5th episode of the season was the Whirly Durly Conspiracy, a long-awaited Rick and Jerry adventure. One of the coolest parts about this episode was the concept of the immortality field. What a crazy concept, and it made for some really fun action sequences. I also really enjoyed the B story in this episode, which involved Summer becoming a gigantic inside-out monster human after messing with some of Rick's tech. Beth refused to ask for Rick's help and tried to use the device herself, only making things worse. Another solid example of character development for Beth this season. The best thing about this episode to me was the gorgeously trippy animated sequence when Rick and Jerry go through a wormhole. It was absolutely bonkers, and I've watched it probably 20 times. In Rest and Ricklaxation, we saw the toxic parts of Rick and Morty's personalities split into completely different entities. This was a really cool concept, and it provided some weirdly exaggerated versions of the characters we know and love. Honestly, the first time I watched this episode, I didn't love it, but it grew on me after a couple more viewings. Sociopathic Morty sort of annoyed me on my first watch, but in the end I think he's easily the highlight of the episode. The funniest bit coming at the very end when we see him become a Wolf of Wall Street type in New York City. The next episode was easily my favorite of the season and is definitely one of my favorites in the franchise. The episode has 2 titles, The Ricklantis Mix-Up and Tales from the Citadel. The writers essentially tried to trick us into thinking it was an Atlantis adventure, but what we got was a series of short stories based on Ricks and Mortys that live on the Citadel of Ricks. This gave us some brilliant homages to Training Day and Stand By Me, as well as some very smart writing that parallels race issues we see in the world today. Personally, I enjoy the show the most when it gets completely lost in the infinite Ricks and Mortys lore, and this episode did not disappoint in that regard. It was a perfect sequel to both Close Encounters of the Rick Kind from season 1 and the season 3 premiere, The Rick Shank Redemption. After our Rick murdered the Council of Ricks, the Citadel holds its first ever democratic election. Various gimmicky Ricks run for president, as well as a single Morty who captures captures the hearts of the disenfranchised Ricks and Mortys on the Citadel. Since the episode follows 4 or 5 different storylines, it moves along really quickly, and each story was equally interesting as they highlighted different aspects of life on the Citadel. Of course, the major reveal at the end was easily the best part of the episode, and even though I saw it coming, it was incredibly effective. After a Morty becomes the new president of the Citadel, some of the higher-up Ricks make it clear that they still run the Citadel. Morty promptly has them executed as we learn that the new president of the Citadel is none other than the evil Eye Patch Morty from Close Encounters of the Rick kind. The very Morty that was able to mind control a Rick and attempted to frame our Rick. This was an incredibly brilliant way to bring back this Morty, and I'm really excited to see where they go with it. There's a lot of theories and speculation about his backstory. The most prominent being that this Morty is our Rick's original Morty, and that was the feeling I had even after Close Encounters back in season 1. Personally, I think at this point that's a little too predictable, but you never know. Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon have said time and time again that they don't necessarily plan these things far in advance to prevent themselves from pigeonholing their writing. So it really could be anything. This is easily the storyline I'm most looking forward to continuing in season 4 and beyond. Episode 8 of the season is called Morty's Mind Blowers, and it was sort of a spiritual successor to Interdimensional Cable. Although I get the sense that this was significantly less improvised than the 2 Cable episodes we saw in the first 2 seasons. It felt more akin to the Community clip show episodes that took a clip show format and showed us a bunch of adventures we had never even seen, and Rick makes this comparison himself in the episode. Overall, I thought this was a really cool episode as Rick shows Morty a handful of memories that he's removed from Morty's brain, generally when Morty's mind was blown too hard or sometimes when he was just ashamed of something he'd done. This was definitely one of the most fun episodes of the season, and a lot of the segments were amazing. I particularly loved the ones about how squirrels are secretly running Earth. I expect we'll get another Morty's Mind Blowers next season, or maybe they'll come up with a new way to give us a clip show style episode. The ABCs of Beth seems to be the most divisive episode of the season for some reason. Many fans felt it was the worst of the series, and I'm not sure I agree. Jerry's B story was amazing, and the Beth backstory was long overdue. We got some great character development for Beth and learned a lot about her past. Maybe I didn't laugh as much as a typical Rick and Morty episode, but the character development was top notch. The episode of course ends with Rick offering Beth the chance to travel the multiverse by herself and replace her earthly duties with a clone, which led to tons of speculation by fans as to whether or not she actually did this. The Rickchurian Morty date was the season finale, and it was a lot of fun. Rick essentially gets into a dick measuring contest with the President of the United States, played once again by the amazing Keith David. This episode had a lot going for it. It was fun to see Rick and Morty sort of grow tired of their own adventures, and it cracked me up that they decided they'd rather play Minecraft than finish the President's request. Rick's high-tech fistfight with the President was an insane sequence, and I had to watch it a couple times to catch everything. The B story in this episode involved Beth panicking that she may be a clone, following up the end of the previous episode, and subsequently getting back together with Jerry. I was surprised that they ended up resolving the is Beth a clone mystery so quickly, but in the end we're led to believe that she is not a clone. Although I would be willing to argue that Rick could still be lying. By the end of the episode, Rick is pretty much willing to leave this dimension entirely as he's essentially wanted for treason after fighting with the President. His solution was easily the biggest laugh for me in the episode. Rick pretends to be an alternate Rick as he throws on a vest and fishing hat and offers his services to the President. This seems to smooth things over while poking fun at the various gimmicky Ricks we've seen over the course of the series. One other thing I want to address is the Rick and Morty fan drama that has plagued the internet like a cancer over the last 3 months. To the quote-unquote fans who claim the female writers have somehow ruined the show, I would like you to sincerely fuck off. Your arguments are bullshit rooted in misogyny and a complete misunderstanding of how TV writing works. Some of you have literally posted writers' personal information online and attempted to intimidate them into leaving the show. If this is you, you're the scum of the fucking earth, and I hope you get what's coming to you. Now back to the actual content of the show. Overall, this season showed why Rick and Morty is still one of the best series on TV. It was completely out there, showcased spectacular sci-fi plotlines, boasted an improved focus on character development, and it only took them 2 years to make 10 episodes. I do think that I probably enjoyed the first 2 seasons a little more than the third, but not by a wide margin. Season 3 also had Tales from the Citadel, which might be my favorite of the series. There are rumors that they're hoping to increase the episode count from 10 to 14 for season 4, which would be a welcome change, especially given that we have to wait so long between seasons. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this Rick and Morty season 3 review. I hope you enjoyed the show this year, and I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please comment, like, subscribe, and of course stay tuned for more reviews, investigation animation, let's plays, and fun videos.
Johnny to Cellos.